This is critical thinking on lymphatic and immunity lab. Now I don't have too many images here because this lab for immunity, for example, you don't have too many images. So therefore I'm going to do just one and then go through some statements. So here are the questions. So here you have a histological picture and you've got to give two relevant features. Here is an application on the effect of removal of lymph nodes. And then here is something to do with immunity and a little bit on tonsils. So now let's go to this first question where it asks you what are two relevant features which help you identify this as a slide of a tonsil. So it already tells you that this is the tonsil. So you have to pick which of the two relevant features here will tell you that this is the tonsil. Now, when you look at these critical thinking videos, make sure you really understand what I'm saying and look at these questions carefully, because here I'm also giving you an idea of how you should answer in your tests and what you should be looking for. So let's look at the first one, which says cortex and medulla and Hassel's corpuscles in medulla. Now this obviously is not the right answer because this is something that is seen in the thymus. And just to show you the thymus, now here's an image from a website that you were required to go to and you had to look at it. So here you can see that this is the thymus. So you can see these areas labeled C are the cortex. You can see it is darker in color. The central area is the medulla. And here you're looking at the Hassel's corpuscles, which are pink structures, onion skin-like, present in the medulla. So you can see here, this is a huge Hassel's corpuscle. So these are all Hassel's corpuscles seen in the medulla. So you can see it is very different from the tonsil. The second one, which is crypts and epithelium lining the crypts, this is the correct answer. So this is what differentiates the tonsil from the rest of the lymphoid tissue. None of the other lymphatic tissue have crypts and none of them have epithelium. Only the tonsil has that. So this is very relevant when you are identifying the tonsil. So therefore this is the correct answer. But let's go and look at the other ones. The red pulp and white pulp and absence of cortex and medulla. Now this is obviously not true. Yes, absence of cortex and medulla is one of the features of the tonsil, but it's not typical of the tonsil because even the spleen does not have cortex and medulla. So you can't say that absence of cortex and medulla is a relevant feature. Red pulp and white pulp is something that is seen in the spleen. So this is something which is very typical of the spleen, the presence of red pulp and white pulp. And just to show you the spleen, so here is an image of the spleen where you can see this red pulp and white pulp, and you can see that it has a very, very typical red and blue appearance. No, you cannot see any crypts, any epithelium lining it. So therefore, this is not the answer which tells you that this is what would identify it as the tonsil. Then presence of cortex and medulla and medullary sinuses. This is typical of the lymph node. And again, to show you a lymph node, so here is a lymph node. So you can see that you have the cortex up here, a darker staining area, and then the medulla here, and in the medulla you have these medullary sinuses. So this is what is seen in the lymph node, not in the tonsil. So hence this would not be a correct answer. And then this one, presence of lymph follicles and germinal centers. Now in the tonsil you do have lymph follicles. You can see these are all lymph follicles, and here you can see germinal centers which are indicative of infection. But this is not a relevant feature which is seen in the tonsil only, because a lymph node also would have that. And just to show you here, so this is a lymph node. So look at it, you have lymph follicles, these are lymph follicles, and look at this one here, this is a germinal center in the lymph follicle. So this could be seen in the lymph node too. So you can't tell whether it's a tonsil or a lymph node based just on the presence of lymph follicles and germinal centers. Hence, you would not choose that answer. So this one, which is crypts and epithelium lining the crypts, are relevant features which helps you to identify that this is the tonsil and no other lymphatic tissue. So here you can see that this is the crypt, this area here is the crypt, and this part where the arrow is pointing, this is the epithelium lining the crypt. I mean, you have other pictures from the websites that you're required to go, which are which are better, which are a little bit more magnified, where you'll see the epithelium better. Now let's go to the next question, which asks you, what would be the effect if the lymph nodes, and this should read if the lymph nodes, change it, if the lymph nodes draining an area were removed. So what you would see is, look at all the choices you have. The body would have no immune response. Obviously this is false, because we are only removing lymph nodes from one particular area. Lymph nodes in all the other areas are still present, so the body would still have immunity. So this is not one of the answers. The second one, the area would become ischemic and would undergo necrosis. Remember, ischemia is something to do with lack of blood supply. Now this is lymphatic drainage, so therefore this is also not correct, because we are not saying that the blood supply is compromised. So this answer is also not correct. The third choice, lymph would have nowhere to drain and would pass into the extracellular tissue and cause edema. Yes, this is what would happen. So imagine you have a particular area, you have lymph vessels which go and they drain into lymph nodes in that area. From this, then again, lymph passes up and goes further upwards. Now you'd remove this. So what will happen? The lymph has nowhere to go, because these lymph nodes are removed. Like, you know, this like a toll gate in the middle is been removed. So lymph naturally will collect in these lymphatic vessels, which will get engorged. The pressure inside them rises. So then lymph is thrown out into the extracellular tissue, and therefore the extracellular tissue spaces now are filled with fluid, so they become swollen, and that causes edema. And in fact, that also results in pain, because nerve endings in that area are compressed, and that causes the pain. So therefore this is the correct answer. But let's go and look at the next choice, which says inflammation and infection would set in and cause swelling and redness and pain. Now swelling will cause a redness and pain, as I explained earlier, but just because you remove the lymph nodes, inflammation and infection will set in is not a necessary feature. Infection will only set in if there's a problem there. So, you know, lymph nodes can be removed with no infection setting in. So therefore, while this is a possibility, it does not always happen. So this is not the best choice. This is the best choice in this set of statements that you have. So this is what you have to think when you're answering questions. And let me go to the last question, which asks you to identify the true statement. So it says a person contracting chickenpox will develop passive natural immunity. Now this is false, because when you get a disease, first of all, that is natural immunity, which is right. But when you get a disease, the body begins to produce antibodies. So that is active immunity. So this is active natural immunity. So therefore, this statement is false. The second one, so this is a false statement. AIDS is a disease where the recognition apparatus breaks down. This is also false, because the recognition apparatus breaks down in autoimmune diseases, and autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis, Graves' disease, lupus, and so on. AIDS is a disease where the immune system is compromised, because the helper T cells which are also known as CD4 cells. So the helper T cells, which are the most important cells in the immune system, these cells are destroyed. So if these cells are destroyed, then the cloning of the cytotoxic and the B lymphocytes cannot occur. So the immune system is totally compromised. So this is different. It's not as if the recognition apparatus breaks down. It is a condition, AIDS, where instead the virus attacks the immune system and knocks off these helper T cells. So the recognition system apparatus is functioning fine. It's just that the immune system is compromised, because if you don't have helper T cells, then cloning cannot occur and the other immune cells cannot carry out their functions. The third statement, Memory cells identify antigens which have been encountered previously and they mount a faster immune response. This is true because this is the function of memory cells. The memory cells, they in their memory, they sort of keep the knowledge of antigens which have been encountered frequently or previously, and what they do is the next time they come in contact with the antigen, they mount a faster immune response. So this is the true statement. But let's go and look at the other ones. Helper T cells produce immunoglobulins. This is false. T cells don't produce immunoglobulins. It is B cells which do that, and in B cells it is the plasma cells which do that. So therefore this is a false statement. And then lastly, the tubal tonsil is lined by pseudostratified ciliated epithelium and lies in the oropharynx. The first part of the statement is correct, but the tubal tonsil does not lie in the oropharynx, it lies in the nasopharynx. So hence the importance of reading all the statements very, very carefully. And you must be able to identify, where structures are lying and what they are lying by. So therefore you can see only the first part is correct, but the second part is wrong. So most students make a mistake when they don't read the sentence carefully. So this finishes this critical thinking video.